Welcome to Coffee and Capstone. Very much appreciate all of you coming. My name is Linda Sollers. I'm on the alumni board for Coffee and for the Alumni Network at University College. And if any of you are interested afterwards, Linnea Hauser, who's our liaison from the college, and myself, Janet, there's several people here that you can talk to. If you have any interest in being involved, we'd love to have you be involved. A couple of logistical things. If you haven't found, the bathrooms are right around the corner here. So you're welcome to go at any point in time if you need to. We will be starting now with the presentation. I'm going to do a little bit of introduction for the person who's going to be presenting. And I don't know how much all of you know about Coffee and about the capstones themselves, but we will also have her advisor speak on the topic that was selected and the process a bit, and perhaps a little bit of the findings, although this is not something that's going to be incredibly academic. We're going to be doing more of a summary and an overview and some of the information that was gleaned from that. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce Carisa Scott, and I'm going to read this so I don't mess up on anything. She is our capstone presenter. She finished last spring, graduated last spring. She is a broadcast journalist who has told countless stories over the last 25 years as a television producer and reporter. Her undergraduate degree is from the University of Missouri, where she majored in journalism. Her master's from University College with an emphasis on alternative dispute resolution. Scott is trained as a mediator and is currently volunteering with the Denver Probate Court. She teaches group fitness at DU's Ritchie Center and also for Denver Parks and Recreation. When she finishes her presentation, then we will have her advisor, Myra Eisenhart, will be up talking about and answering, and both of them will be answering some questions on this. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carisa.
Good morning. So I have a loud voice too. Is that okay? Usually at this time, I'm over at the Ritchie Center teaching what's called a core class. So I see a couple of you who usually go to that core class. So if I ask them to get down and do me, 12 push-ups, don't be surprised, because we do a lot of push-ups in core. But I am happy to be here this morning. Let me get rid of this. To talk about forgiveness, because forgiveness also has many positive health benefits. And a lot of us associate forgiveness with our religion or the concept of sinful behavior. But research shows that forgiveness is so much more than that you can really reap some great physical and emotional benefits of forgiveness. One thing that is really important to talk about, and that's the nature of the event. There are many factors that depend on whether forgiveness is possible, if an offender offers an apology, or if you as a victim can offer forgiveness. So we'll look at some of those factors and how hopefully we can understand the process a little more and understand the process of an apology. So quickly, our agenda this morning: what is forgiveness? What is forgiveness not? The physical and emotional effects, which are, to me, were very surprising, what the research has shown. Thank you. And if you put the physical and emotional effects together, how that in turn may result in some community effects. Survey results. For those of you who are working on your capstone, you may be considering a survey, and I did include 2 surveys. This morning we'll just talk about one, but we'll talk about the survey results. And then, what is an effective apology? Researchers say that an apology includes steps that it's more than just, I'm sorry. And so we'll look at those steps of an apology, and hopefully that'll give you some more ideas. So before we get started on this agenda, I'm a journalist, so I ask a lot of questions. And so I'm going to ask you a question this morning. And you don't have to answer out loud. You can just hold the thought in your mind, and if you close your eyes, if you want to, sometimes that helps. So the question is, did you have a conflict, a face-to-face conflict this past week, or maybe this past month? And when you think about that conflict, think about what it's doing to your body. Do you feel tense? Do you feel aggravated? Do you clench your fist? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel sad? One more question. When was the last time that someone hurt your feelings? How does that make you feel? Does it affect your body? Well, scholars say that forgiveness does affect your body, that there are many physical effects. So let's look at just a couple of the ideas of what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not. So forgiveness is, according to scholars, a process that promotes the release of negative feelings. And those negative feelings are usually associated with the harmful acts, the hurtful actions that we've talked about. Also, many authors feel like forgiveness is an internal process, that there's a process of letting go of a grudge. So I don't know how many of you listen to Alanis Morissette. Some of you. Well, Alanis Morissette has this song, and it's called The Grudge. And she starts the song with, for 19 years, 12 months, 11 days, 12 hours, 14 minutes, I've held this grudge. And while I don't sing it and sound like she does, I think you get the idea that people hold tightly to their grudges, that she can remember exactly when the violation happened, when the violation of the social norm happened, when something bad happened. She remembers exactly. And so some of you I know are thinking about mediation, and I think it's important to know that people can really hold on to it. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. When you forgive, you're not forgetting the harmful act. No one's asking you to forget what happened. And no one is saying that the hurtful act was okay. Scholars are not saying that forgiveness is about saying, okay, that was okay, just because you've offered forgiveness. You may not give up justice or restitution, and unfortunately, forgiveness cannot be required. I grew up in a household with 3 older sisters, and believe me, there was a lot of forgiveness going on. But forgiveness as adults, we can't require that. So I mentioned that I'm a fitness instructor. I'm a personal trainer, and this poor guy is illustrating a heart attack. And that is not what we want to see over at the Ritchie Center. But I think it's important to bring up this research because it brings home the point that, yes, forgiveness can be physically have harmful effects to your body. So they studied heart attack patients, and this research was done in the early 90s by Williams and Williams. And they had an idea that maybe if we teach patients to act more forgiving and to hold on to less anger and hostility, that maybe they would have a healthier heart. And the research shows that in the end, they could measure an improved cardiovascular system, which in turn improved their relationships and their quality of life. Another study, high blood pressure. So many people suffer with high blood pressure. And so it's an easy medical tool to measure your blood pressure. This particular study came from one of my favorite books during this process. So I brought a couple of books with me. Forgiveness is a Choice by Dr. Robert N. Wright. And in this book was just a plethora of studies, and in particular high blood pressure studies. included several studies where the researchers looked at whether or not, if they could teach their patients to resolve their anger, could they lower their blood pressure? And guess what? They did. They found that if they could resolve the anger, the patient's blood pressure would improve, and then in turn their cardiovascular system improved. So another positive benefit of forgiveness. Back pain. Almost everyone I see as a personal trainer at some point says, I have back pain. And so I think it's important to talk about this study. It was done at Duke University Medical Center. And researchers there found that anger can be a major complicating factor in the treatment of persistent pain. So anger, after they were able to teach the patients to have positive emotions and teach them to promote kindness and forgiveness, the patients reported a reduction in pain. So overall, the research talks about how anger affects every organ of your body. And if anger is affecting every organ of your body over an extended period of time, I think we all know what that means. So emotional effects. We've talked a little bit about emotional effects and how to train yourself to forgive. And this particular study was done at Stanford University. It was called the Stanford Forgiveness Project. And they wanted to teach people how to use forgiveness. So they had participants attend 1 hour sessions, and there were 6 sessions. And during those 6 one-hour sessions, they used visualization and behavior modification techniques to try to train people. One of the most important parts of this process was training people to stop replaying the negative event. Stop replaying in your mind what happened. That the researchers found that the more you replay that event over and over in your mind, that the more harmful it is for you. And that you need to move into a positive and give up your grievances. So after the individuals went through this training process, they did find that they had improved health and improved relationships. So you kind of get the idea that if I can adopt a more forgiving manner, I can help my body physically and I can help my mind. So if you put those two ideas together, some researchers say that there is some kind of moral duty to use this interior transformation that you have and use that to restore relationships. And if you live, say, in a condominium complex, this is an idea. You've got to live right next to that person. And you need to restore the relationship and then, in turn, restore community. And these ideas, researchers say, are building blocks, that you can use these building blocks to build a better society. And during the process of reading the research that is available, all of you who are working on your thesis, you'll read a lot of material, and you'll find quotes that resonate. And this particular quote resonated with me. Until we can forgive even the most horrendous of acts, how can we as a society or as a civilization live together in peace? And so forgiveness is critical to our lives as individuals and as society as a whole. Is that timed out? Is that why that comes up? So that gives you an idea of the physical effects. Any questions at this point? Anybody want to interject? I'm more of a interactive type presenter. And if you don't have any interjections, then you might have to do push-ups or... One final quote from Desmond Tutu that I think, as an international leader of peace, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, he also wrote a book on forgiveness. And I love the title, No Future Without Forgiveness. And in this book, he really talks about how there have been crises in South Africa. And one example would be South African President Nelson Mandela, who was jailed for 27 years. And what that did to his country, and then how the release of Mandela, and then how his public apology made the difference of the course of the country after his release. So the future of the world lies in the ability of leaders to practice the humility of forgiveness. So the future of the world. So I think it's probably worth some communication and some discussion. Questions? Everybody okay? Okay, stretch, reach, stretch, rest your neck. So if you're doing your thesis, you may be considering a questionnaire or some means of gathering information, research, primary research. And so during my process, I wanted to ask a questionnaire. And thank goodness Dr. Eisenhart worked with me through the questionnaire process, because I was going to ask a questionnaire just from the victim of a violations point of view. And my was, well, what about the person apologizing? What about the offender? And so I ended up having two questionnaires, one from the victim's point of view and then one from the offender's point of view. So we're only going to go through one, but I just want you to know that it is a process that takes quite a bit of time. And so I would start thinking about that process and what primary research you want to gather. Surveys or questions, what do they produce? Well, overall, they just help us gain insight and give me the idea, the relevance of the topic. How important is forgiveness? I did mention that I gave two surveys. Just talking about one survey this morning. One more note, all the surveys were filled out by women. And that was not done on purpose in the beginning, but I just mention that because things happen as the process continues. I gave the surveys out at group fitness classes. Most of the classes, the women offered to fill out the surveys. And so at the end of the day, when you have 34 women and one man, it gives you an idea that maybe I should just limit this to women. Okay, so the survey from the victim of a violation. So looking at this from the victim's point of view. And basic demographics, most surveys have just some basic demographics. The age on this one was particularly important to me because I wanted to make sure I included some young people. And so there were 4 16-year-olds who filled this out. Majority of women who filled it out were between 40 and 70. Like I said, they were all filled out by women. The level of education, all the women were high school graduates. 10 have their advanced degree, with 25 women having their undergrad. And then you move into the questions. How important is forgiveness viewed in your religious tradition? And this was not a surprise. Very important, or somewhat important. 26 women found that their forgiveness, their thought process, their culture, what they've experienced, has probably been tied greatly with their religion. So question 4. Think of an act or event you found very difficult or impossible to forgive. So the nature of the act. Now, many scholars believe that the nature of the act really determines whether forgiveness is possible. And that a lot of people believe when you go through the apology process, that acknowledging the nature of the act is critical. So this question was important in regards to what happened. Most of the women felt like that they had a violation of trust, and then a lot of women felt like that there was a combination of violations, whether the event was physically harmful, financially harmful, damaging to their reputation, emotionally harmful, or other. And there was a place on the questionnaire to fill out and share your story or share what happened if you so wanted to. Question 5, what was the relationship between you and the offender? So why is this important? Because we hurt the ones we love. And usually the ones you love are the ones you have ongoing relationships with. Unfortunately, this questionnaire, the women who filled it out said that they had a violation from their spouse or partner, that their family was involved in the violation, or friends. And so it's important to look at that relationship that exists between the parties. This was not a surprise either. Most research shows that people hurt the ones they love. How did the other party attempt to achieve forgiveness with you? Now, question 6 looks at the communication options available to deliver an apology, and that was the focus of the question. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily what happened. 11 women said that they were not offered an apology, that there was not even an attempt for the offender to make an apology. So I think that's where you step back and it gives you the relevance of the topic. People aren't forgiving. Maybe people aren't thinking about it. Maybe think about what I ask you to consider first. What is preventing the apology? So those women who did get an apology face-to-face, a lot of women say that in their questionnaire they were offered an apology face-to-face and that's why they accepted it. Other means, a lot of individuals say that they use a combination, and 4 individuals did use a text or an email to apologize, but they also used the telephone or a written card or a face-to-face to reinforce the apology. So face-to-face, despite the growing comfort of social media and the idea that we continue to have conversations on books, Facebook, and other services, still the majority of these individuals received their apology face-to-face. So, yes, ma'am.
Does anyone know if apologies happen multiple times?
If apologies happen?
If multiple times, if they were told they were sorry repeatedly.
The only note was if they used a second form. So if they text, then an individual might write, I followed up the text with a phone call, or I followed up the email with a face-to-face. Yes, Mary Kate?
How does that change the impact of I guess maybe receiving the apology and how it's delivered?
Mm-hmm. It really made me realize the importance of the topic, that I need to really look at how to give an apology and help people understand that there is a process and that process works and makes us feel better and makes us move from a negative to a positive. Yes, ma'am?
Well, I was curious about number 11, or number A, where there are 11 responses where they didn't try. Is it possible that the other party didn't feel they had a reason to apologize?
You can't speak for somebody else's process, and so I would think, yes, that's a possibility, absolutely. So just some ideas, big picture. That's okay, because we're going to talk about the definition next. Women apologize more than men. Research shows that women apologize more than men. If you're a mediator or if you're training to be a mediator, guilt, shame, and empathy are all precursors to an apology. And each apology event is unique. So as we move in to the definition of an apology, I want you to think about, okay, when's the last time you said, I'm sorry? And now, do you feel like that was very effective? Let's look at the definition. An encounter between two parties in which one party, the offender, acknowledges the responsibility. Acknowledges responsibility for the offense and expresses regret or remorse to a second party. And this quote comes from my favorite book on apology, called On Apology. And this book really breaks down the process and talks about how apology holds a lot of power. A lot of power. Think about that. A lot of power between the individuals involved. And we all know that an apology can help hurt feelings. But what else? There is an effective apology process, according to the researchers, and that process starts with regret. The offender needs to show regret. They need to show what happened, confirm the violation by showing what happened or explaining what happened, and show that they regret what happened, that they feel badly about what happened. And you recognize the impact of what happened. You recognize the impact on the individual, how it hurt them. And then scholars say you've got to have some corrective action. I mean, this goes back to the questionnaire about the relationship. If you're going to have an ongoing relationship with your boss, which I hope that you do, then this is a process to think about. And the plan to restore, you correct the action, and then how's the behavior going to be in the future? What are you going to change? What do you need to restore? All of those are part of the process of an effective apology. Not just, I'm sorry. So effective apology outcomes. We've talked about internal process where it can help you physically and mentally. There is also the idea that it can help our communities. And the example with the South African president, Nelson Mandela, when he was released, I don't know how many of you remember this, but when he was released, there wasn't a lot of time passed before he was saying that he forgave his jailers. He forgave his captors. And most of it comes from Desmond Tutu's book. And that he could understand why the process happened the way it happened, and that he forgave them. He forgave them and asked his community to forgive and move from a negative to a positive and move forward. And many believe that if the country would not have moved forward, that there would have been continued civil war. And one final example of how this process may help us move forward would be from September 11th, Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. And this is a group who lost family members in the 9/11 terrorism attacks. And you may read from time to time, or you may see an ad that they have in newspapers, billboards, magazines, and they're all about promoting peace with nonviolent acts. And so if they can promote peace, then maybe the rest of us can promote peace as well. So in summary, I just want to reinforce the positive effects. So many studies about the positive effects of forgiveness. And so if you find yourself not really being able to let go of that grudge, think about those positive effects. Letting go of the grudge, moving forward, is what I read over and over. That the researchers really believe that that is the point that you really need to focus on. And that is letting go of the grudge and moving on. That, in turn, will transform yourself and possibly your relationships. Forgiveness can also be a benefit to business. Research shows that sincere acknowledgement of mistakes not only reduces resentment, but legal actions offered by the offended party. If you're a mediator or moving into mediation, you might be able to suggest this process to a client in a caucus. So there are ways to use this beyond just in your own life. And I am a big health, fitness encourager. And I really believe that if you can take this and use it in your personal life, that you'll find yourself using it with your friends too. And then you'll explain to your friends, you can't just say, I'm sorry. You got to do this other stuff too. That makes it a whole process. That makes me feel like that you're serious and that this is an effective apology because I can forgive. So questions, problems you want to talk about with this process? Dr. Eisenhart is going to talk a little bit more about how you put this project together. And we'll take questions and hopefully help you if you're working on your thesis. Questions? Come on up, Dr. Eisenhart. And yes, sir.
It seems to me that the path into the future, to move on, has to be in somebody's mind. How is that part of the forgiveness action?
Well,
It doesn't just happen by magic.
oh, absolutely not. I think we've talked about, that there are processes and that there are steps, and you gotta want to go there. I mean, you've got to have the process, and you've got to have a cognitive process in your mind that you want to forgive, or that you want to accept an apology. It's internal. It starts with an internal process.
I'm going to jump in. I want to introduce you.
There's a couple more questions.
Let me just, I want to introduce Dr. Eisenhart, and then we will go ahead and do that. So let me just, hello? Okay. Just want to make sure. I'm going to read this again, but I do want you to meet Dr. Eisenhart and know a little bit about her. She teaches, writes, and consults about alternative dispute resolution, ADR. Her bachelor's is from Wellesley College. Her master's and PhD in human communication are from University of Denver. She has extensive training, including seminars from CDR and Harvard Law School. She has 30 years experience in consulting, training, and coaching communication skills for the workplace. And she's the author of many articles and the co-author of the book Collaborative Approaches to Resolving Conflict in 2000 and Negotiation as a Way of Life in 2003, both published by Sage Publication. Her latest research topic is forgiveness. And I'm going to introduce her, and then if the two of you want to answer some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Can you hear me without the mic?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make a couple of comments about the Capstone process. First, before we could return to your very good questions, if that's okay. And I would just begin by saying that this is a really special morning for me. I retired in June from teaching at University College and even generally. and this is my first time back in 6 months. And Carisa is my last Capstone student. She is my Capstone. And I am so proud of the work she did, and just so happy about the partnership that we were able to have together. Linda mentioned those books published by Sage. Some of you may have had them. Are any of you here graduate students? Yes. Okay, so you may know those books. The Collaborative Approach to Resolving Conflict has just been chosen by Sage to become their first online platform. So we're getting sucked into the future, whether we want to or not, becoming online with the book itself. So, at any rate, let me just make a few comments then, since there are some of you who are in this Capstone process, and say what, as a teacher, I found so exceptional about the way Carisa approached this. And I think an easy explanation as to why she was chosen to be one of the coffee and capstones. And first of all, of course, the topic. I mean, why would we roll out of bed on a Saturday morning and the laundry's not done and the groceries not chopped and all of that? It's a very compelling topic. And Mike and myself couldn't believe that as communication people, there's so little there. This is a field we have given over to the psychologists and the theologians. And those of you who've taken interpersonal communication know that Wilmot and Hocker book, it's the primary one in the field. Everybody who does interpersonal conflict studies that book. Do you remember the chapter on forgiveness? It's the very last one in the book. Who wrote it? Not communication people. They gave it to a pastor to write. So that's fun. But Carisa's questions about how does an apology get said? When is it said? What does it have to include? All of those are communication issues. So it's a very underdeveloped field. And I've been kind of pounding that one for a couple of years until our class on organizational conflict, and Carisa was there and several other people who turned out to be Capstone students. It was one of those classes that you have, if I said to you, think of the best class you had at University College, you wouldn't have to sit all morning to think about it. I bet you could tell me right off the top of your heads. Well, the dirty little secret is teachers have the same kind of lists. And we remember exceptional classes and exceptional students, and that was certainly one. So anyway, Carisa picked up on the idea of forgiveness as a possible topic, which was wonderful. And we learned several things from her capstone. One, what we would never have thought about asking the question about social media. But as a journalist, that was something, of course, she thought about. We didn't think to put in our questionnaire the fact that nobody even tried to apologize. Okay, what, in other words, we just said, well, how did they go about doing it? And half our respondents said they didn't. So it was from her results that we knew we had to add a line in our questionnaire that said didn't even try. Carisa and I have also had the opportunity to present a couple times here at DU at the Women's College, at the Women's Conference, which is held at the Women's College. It's every spring. It's an excellent one if some of you have a chance.
April 20th.
To go. April 20th is when it's going to be this year. There you go. And then when Mike Spangle got suddenly pulled out from the Bar Association Conference where we were to present in November, there also Carisa was able to come and be my co-presenter. So we're colleagues now as opposed to the student-teacher relationship. At any rate, let me just highlight, she's mentioned a couple of these aspects the excellent Capstone, but for just, with the possibility of it that might be repeating, let me just sort of thump on that because I've seen it so many times. The early thinking. Thinking about your topic before you actually get into process, because you're going to be knowing more than you ever wanted to know about that question. And so turn over a lot of rocks and make sure that that's the ground you want to know everything about. The other things that she did, I think she didn't say that she did a very thorough review, but if you look at her capstone, you will see how widely she read, and that showed up as a strength. Her research, I thought was very interesting. She did both the in-depth interviews and the survey. So she, with 3 professionals, who, attorneys, psychologist, and mediator, she got the sort of big story that gives context to these numbers that you pull out of your survey. And then doing the survey for both offender and offended, I thought, made it overall just was so strong. Mike and I are continuing. We presented several times. We have a proposal on forgiveness again in terms of how can mediators facilitate forgiveness. So would love to get your thoughts about that, those of you who are interested in mediation. And thank you for filling out the questionnaires that we use. There's some already in the box that are on the table as you go out, and we so appreciate being able to include your thoughts in our, I think we have about 110 of these completed already, and if we get 25 more this morning, we're thrilled. Okay. There were some interesting questions that came up in the course of Carisa's presentation. And Stephanie, what if we go back to yours? Would you say it one more time? Remind me. Was yours about the multiple?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
people,
How did you phrase that?
if they apologize over a series of time repeatedly, and if that helps with the forgiveness factors. So
Okay.
re-acknowledge again and again and again that they did something wrong.
Okay, there's 2 pieces to this that I think are very interesting. One is, yes, we found that people do use the social media, do use the phone, do write notes, but it's generally, for it to be a successful transaction, it tends to end up those being lead-ups to the face-to-face. So that accounts for some of the multiple. Now, at our women's conference, do you remember, one of the questions that came was from a person, long time married, who said, how do you forgive somebody who keeps repeating the offense and apologizing? So the apology is sincere, but the offense is coming time after time. I've never seen anybody address that, but I think it's a really interesting question. Yes?
I have a tag-on question to that.
Yeah.
Forgiveness seems to be a wonderful way to release all the tension in your own body that doesn't address the actual issue itself. So to go along with the question that you just put out there, which is, apology is great if it continues to happen. To me, that means you're not addressing the issue. You're not addressing the problem. You're not fixing the core of it. Thoughts
Okay.
there?
Okay, I think this will help us transition back into your question about how does this work? So I like to think about forgiveness, but what's the action? The Stanford study that Carisa cited about helping people to forgive is coming out of a psychology department, and the process involves 6 weeks of meeting with people. So these are folks who, A, as Carisa says, you have to have the motivation. You have to want to forgive. That's step one. But it's not the only step. And so these third parties are then facilitating over the course of 6 weeks how to let go. And those of you, any of you study mediation, any of you in the conflict resolution program, and so you know about narrative theory. Narrative mediation simply is a fancy way of talking about when we forgive, we change our stories, the stories we tell ourselves. And if we're still telling ourselves the old story of being a victim, if that's the title of our story is victim, then we're not going anywhere. When we can tell ourselves the new story, maybe the survivor story, that's the transition. That's what happens at Stanford with these people over the course of 6 weeks. Okay, that's the way psychologists do this. Okay, then the question, okay, so we can forgive, that's the internal process. But as Carisa pointed out, it doesn't substitute for making things right. Part of that process of true forgiveness is involved restitution. Sometimes it's justice. Sometimes it's having the offender never having another relationship. I want to forgive for my own benefit, but I don't want to reconcile. I'm not going back into that abusive relationship. If you do want a continuing relationship, then that's when there has to be some kind of restitution, psychological, physical. Yes?
I guess this is kind of a spin-off of that. And it kind of addresses the liberty that you mentioned was done. I'm intrigued by the idea of maybe a sociobiological lens behind this. For example, with jealousy, it's noted that it's often a trigger that there's a threat to the relationship. And so jealousy is functional in a way for people because it lets them understand that there might be a threat and they have to change their actions, I guess. And so when it comes to forgiveness or this idea of hurt or a grudge, is there research on if there is a benefit to it? Is there something useful to these grudges or to being hurt? And how is that kind of played out psychologically as well as through the communication patterns?
Excellent question. And I think it gets at the bigger question perhaps of why is this so hard? Why is it we're pulled out of bed on a Saturday morning? Because, it's forgiveness touches all of us. To the extent we love, we're liable to hurt and be hurt, as Carisa points out. Why do you think? What's the nature of this stuckness? What are the advantages of staying in the victim role? Attention. What else?
You don't have to leave the victim role, you don't have to move on.
Okay, it's a comfortable place. It's a place we understand, we know, we've, sometimes, what is it, the devil we know better than the one we don't. What else?
Denial.
Okay,
Yeah, they don't want to person.
okay, all right, anything else?
What about it caused me physical harm, so I should stay away from it? Something like that. I'm thinking of legitimately good things that might come up with a grudge if it does keep you away from being in a relationship.
Okay.
It's actually physically harmful.
Okay, can all of you over
No.
here? No, Stephanie, just a little bit
Oh.
loud. Please, we don't want to miss what you're saying.
Say, what about the beneficial act of your body recognizing that you should stay away from that relationship, that it is, for example, a physically harmful one?
Do you want to?
You're doing great. I have an ice cream in my mouth, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think we would make a distinction between knowing the boundaries of safety and holding a grudge. So the moving into forgiveness in the case of worries about safety, then would not have reconciliation as a goal, but would look to forgive in the sense of a better future for oneself, not being psychically bound up with that person who has hurt us. Yes?
Well, and I hope I'm not intruding, but often when people are in those abusive situations, whether it's through mental, physical, or whatever, the ability to remove themselves and have the ability to act against that becomes diminished, and they accept that, and that becomes the model within their mind, and they really are controlled by that until you find a way to break that cycle and take them to either through intervention or whatever, to remove them from that and let them, because mentally they're not able to go and say, I need to get out, they're trapped by it, and it literally traps them within it.
Yeah.
Within that cycle, either they feel they deserve it, that they can't function independent of it, that nobody will help them, even if they have family members who are trying to talk out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can talk and talk and talk, but until they're able to internalize and you either that because you take them out of the situation and give them time and another reality, or they some way come to it and they can move out until they can, because a logical, well-intended, heart-to-heart, trying to explain it to them, it doesn't go beyond here.
There may be too much fear to
Well, and
go to
actually
that
there's a
logical
change of
place.
mindset, an emotional overload.
Yes.
I think the second question is, how is forgiveness practiced or not in your family of origin? We didn't practice it in my family. And it's interesting now that I've come back to college and learned about locus of control.
Yes.
External or internal
Yes.
locus of control. And I look at my family, and my family is such an external locus of control. And my whole family does. And it's just like, and I brought this up to my family, and it's just, I mean, my family's very willing to listen, but there was just nothing in the home that we ever practiced forgiveness. We always just blamed everybody else.
So much of this can be simply habit.
Yeah.
And until we leave our family of origin, get some distance, see some other models, we just figure that's the way it happens. Yeah, thank you. Does everyone understand the internal, external locus of control? Internal mean I make my own decisions. External, I look to others who guide me. I want my grandfather to tell me what to do. I expect my church to set the rules, whatever would be more the external, which is talking. Yeah. There were, as Mike and I have gotten deeper into these surveys that you filled out for today, we've just, and some of the reading, some of the literature about who is able to be helped by, say, a program like Stanford, that there are certain very telling variables that as mediators we would look for amongst our clients. So we would be attuned to whether or not somebody's coming out of a family situation where they just not seen mediation practice. Forgiveness, excuse me, for apologies. They haven't heard adults asking, requesting, receiving forgiveness. They haven't seen this transaction happen on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so some coaching is indicated. We know that religion plays a really big part. And it doesn't matter what religion. We've had Buddhists, we've had Catholics, we've had Jewish people, fill out these questionnaires, and the more religious they are, the more they feel they should forgive. They really should work on it. Yes?
I'm curious about cultural differences with apology and forgiveness. Do you come across any research that shed light on whether it's more of a universal thing in terms of how it's practiced?
Could you all hear Carl's question? Are there any cultural variables?
Yeah, language.
Well, it's so interesting you would ask that question because Mike and I had it on our first questionnaire. And we just didn't get back anything. I don't think people, within a setting like this, everyone understands Carl's question. But just on a general basis.
Is there any research?
And we have it, we know that across cultures, that there would be fascinating differences in forgiveness. So if we're talking about, say, Arab cultures, for instance, some desert cultures have what we would consider in the U.S. pretty extreme views about revenge. And so you, as a male in the family, if anyone in your family has been seriously offended, okay, something's been stolen, a daughter or a niece has been raped, then you as the young male are required to take revenge. If you forgave and walked away, you would be an outcast. Okay, so we are definitely talking about operating within a cultural frame here in terms of what we are saying. Yes?
Hi, I'm from Nigeria.
Oh, good.
And basically, when it comes to forgiveness, people actually don't forgive. They usually don't forgive. We are not taught how to forgive, really. And families are enemies from one generation to another. And basically, very little grudge starts with maybe our parents, and then 3 generations down, they still hate each other.
Right.
And they don't know why they hate each other.
Right.
And their parents are probably dead. So it's very destructive to the community
Yes.
and to the family dynamics.
Yes.
Because you have cousins that don't like each other. And they have no
For no reason.
For no reason except what their parents passed down to them. So
Thank you.
it's very destructive.
That's always better to have the first example. This is basically what I'm reading to the Thank you. Yes?
I guess in light of that question, why don't you ask for the ethnic information on the survey?
The ethnic information?
Right.
We could. We didn't, as I say, we bombed out with cultural. We just didn't get back anything that was, helped us discriminate at all.
Did you?
But we certainly can do that if we look at international cultures. We were trying to look at it in terms of U.S. subcultures. Would it make a difference?
So in that initial survey, did you ask for that demographic information?
We did. Yeah.
But these are also people that they don't talk about these things. You are quiet about it, it's just not spoken. Everybody knows about it, but it's not spoken. You're not allowed to talk about it. So it is very difficult to get response from people when they are not supposed to talk about those things.
Yes, right. How are you going to ever remediate it if you can't have a dialogue?
And then when you talk about it, then people are going to hate you for talking about it. So people don't talk.
Okay. Now, interestingly enough, there is a conflict resolution process in the Arab culture that has to do with the village elders. And what it looks like, one of these young men is required to take revenge. This group of older men will get together as a group, go to the family and sit down, and the family has to sit with them because they're the respected elders in the community, and they just exhausted. They sit and talk for days until finally some kind of, and then they go to the offender family and they say, look, our community doesn't need this, doesn't want this, you did a really bad thing, you gotta give 10 goats or 3 cows, whatever it is, you gotta make it right in the material sense without hurting individuals. So there are some processes.
Yeah, we have that as well.
Do you?
Yes, we do, and basically, just the key people in the family that are respected, then they get together and mediate. And sometimes they never come to an agreement. So people still go on and do what they want to do. Or maybe they might come to an agreement and say, okay, you're supposed to pay this or you're supposed to do that. And then there's a younger generation, high-tempered, can't control themselves, and they go off and do what they need to do to avenge their sibling, and then they start the whole process all over again. So it's very difficult.
Wow. Okay, let me throw out, oh, yes.
Myra, do you guys have any information on the function or the role of other factors that affect knowing or unknowing true forgiveness? Like outside people or situations or other things that occur? Are there outside factors that can affect the true ability to forgive as opposed to just within oneself as well?
I'm sure there are. And, you know, we didn't focus that way, but I'm sure there are, just from these kinds of questionnaires and what lots of people have written us, these wonderful narratives on the back about here's what happened and so forth, is, you know, there's certain very serious acts of mostly physical but some emotional violence that are clearly harder to forgive than others. And certainly there are certain kinds of relationships, the kind of relationships, as Carisa pointed out, within which these acts occur, where intimacy is destroyed, trust is broken. So yes, outside there certainly are other factors.
One interjection, if I may. Amy, I did read about time being a factor. And that would be one of those elements I think you're talking about. And time, 20 years have gone by since the act. Can you still forgive? Can the offender still apologize? Some researchers say absolutely, that even though time is a factor, that if you really want to go through this process and your heart needs to go through this process as well as your head, that time is not important. But then other researchers will say after so many years, they've replayed it so many times, and like Joan Calvert expressed, that they develop their own kind of sense of reality of what life is and what happened and how it's supposed to be. And so after so long a time, that forgiveness is not possible. So I think there are factors like that. I just didn't look at a lot of them.
Just a short personal note. I think it gets to your question over there as well. Unlike you, who has 3 sisters, I have 3 brothers. And I'm the only girl, and we've been going through a lot the last number of years with parent stuff. Long story short, what I found that was so interesting is I wanted forgiveness from this one brother, right, for a long time, over the years. And I finally just thought, well, whatever, it's not going to happen. As soon as I decided to really just let go, take my focus off of it, go on, just, you know, whatever happened with him happened, and I just continued on my merry way. So I kind of let go of something. And then at the same time, my other 2 brothers ended up sort of having to confront one of them as the one that was sort of doing some of this strange behavior as well. And once I let go, as well as my brothers confronted him, and then we all just said whatever, then we got the apology and the forgiveness started happening. So it's just interesting as to all these other factors. And my mom comes into play and talked with him.
Sure.
So I think other people, as well as ourselves, what's happening inside ourselves,
Well, that's
really
what-
play a huge role.
Absolutely, and as we talked about in Arab cultures or Nigeria, it's the elders. Mike and I are, as practitioners, as mediators, we're quite sure that oftentimes a mediator can play a role in pointing out where forgiveness is possible, might be a consideration, and if the person is open to it, how to phrase an apology. So yeah, the role of the third party is huge. In terms of the time factor, it's one that we haven't looked at well enough, I'm sure, and could cut either way. Could cut either way. We've had some people write about situations where the person they wanted forgiveness from, I'm saying this backward, the person who offended them has died. And so some people got stuck by the fact that they couldn't transact, and other people felt relieved and that they could. So there's a certain je ne sais quoi. There's a certain underlying mystery to something that's as deeply embedded in our opinions and our relationships as forgiveness. Yes?
This is for Carissa. So you are speaking, your research is like, it seems very focused on deep hurts that require forgiveness, whereas there are lots of little hurts that occur in communication, whether that's with family or coworkers, where, you know, I think about how do you just continue that relationship that you need to have if it's small little hurts without acknowledging, you know, some big wrongdoing, but just like, I'm sorry that things didn't, you know, we're not communicating well.
I think the most important thing I can say is that each apology is unique, and that each unique experience has so many variables, and that some are more important to some people than others. And what you may find to be a small infraction, somebody else may think that it's more than that. So I didn't really embrace this, was thinking about the worst offending, you know, acts that I could encounter. It was more about how to get through day to day. If I have a disagreement or a conflict with my boss at 9 o'clock in the morning, how do I forgive myself or whatever needs to happen to move forward? Does he owe me an apology because he was out of bounds? I mean, there's so many factors. But if you think about it and think about the process, maybe you can make it work. I don't think it depends if the offense is criminal or if the offense is I knocked over your coffee. I think the process works either way.
Well, I'm a nurse, and there are a lot of communication issues that occur in very high stress situations where, you know, people will hold on to these. I mean, it will ruin, you know, relationships within, you know, a working environment because people are not willing to just say, you know, we didn't communicate well. I'm sorry for that. You're not acknowledging or accepting wrongdoing, but just that the experience wasn't good for us, and we need to move on and heal and let go.
That sounds like positive steps, moving from a negative to a positive to me. Do you want to come in on that?
It makes me think there's more to the answer to Amy's question. We haven't...
Other factors.
Yeah, and one would be organizational norms. And there are workplaces where apologies are easy and they come frequently, and there are others where, especially between levels, the superior level would be perhaps less likely to apologize to the less high level. Maybe the surgeon would be less likely to apologize to the receptionist. Yeah, I know. So, you know, when you have an organization like a medical organization where the hierarchy is pretty set in stone, then my experience just practically is, and I don't know research on this, but just as a practical matter, probably less likely to happen than it would be, say, from nurse to nurse. I don't know, but there's another outside factor, is what's normative in your community. Well, you had an end.
Yeah, I was gonna ask a different question unless somebody has another comment.
Well, I was gonna say, as Mary Kay, you brought this up earlier about relationship between people. What I find in my family is when there's been a hurt or wrongdoing and there's no apology, and I go and I say, I need an apology, they're like, well, we're family, it should be implied that I'm sorry. And I think that sometimes in work relationships, when there's hierarchy, that is more or less implied that,
That's a
you know, that
really
you
interesting
should-
point. One, a big question is, does an apology have to be spoken to be effective?
And I say yes.
Okay, we're communication people, so we lean toward the yes answer. Is that always true?
I would say a lot of instances it would be a required action. You see the actions change and that's kind of apology.
Okay,
There is
all right.
actions
We have,
being
Mike and I
done.
found this in organizational consulting, is sometimes people can't or won't apologize, back to the business setting, but they do change their behavior as requested. And so it's not exactly the same as the forgiveness we're talking about, but it does allow people to let go and move on. So, is there any act that cannot be forgiven?
I say no.
You'd say no.
I think there's always forgiveness.
Anything, no matter how terrible. Everybody agree? No. What do you think?
There are some things that we as a people, as a culture, we must protect. Life of the innocent, the sexual and the personal protection of young, of people within our culture, the elderly. You can do what you must within a legal framework. Sometimes it's taken in by the people of the group where the violation occurs to take care of it. But those are humanity's responsibilities toward the members of the human race. And to violate those are non-forgiven.
All right, that's another point of view, that there may be sacrosanct things that cannot be forgiven. What do you think, Ann?
I think it depends on who's involved, and the timing of the whole thing. There's certain things that would happen at one point in a person's life that you would think that should never be forgiven. Other people might say, well, it's okay, that's one that should be forgiven. So I think it really depends on the readiness, the people involved, their viewpoints, what systems they came from. So it's an individual and a moving target.
There's an answer in between, it depends. Yes.
I will have to say no because I feel there's a fine line between forgiveness and reconciliation. Just because I don't reconcile with you doesn't mean I have not forgiven you. Because I think forgiveness is personal and internal and just letting it go so that you can have peace. But I don't have to be your friend. The boundary line is set and you can't cross it again. And sometimes when you set those boundaries, people usually have the misconception that you have not forgiven. when actually you have set a boundary just to protect yourself, to make sure you don't go there again.
And in some ways that leads to the question I was going to ask was, what's your thought on the saying, I can forgive, but I can't forget? Is that truly forgiveness?
What do you think?
I
Not
think
in our
it relates
definition.
to your
Yeah.
explanation is that you come with internally, how can I move forward?
Exactly. Build the
Whether
new
you
story.
yeah.
Just think about building the new story, and so the old story, do you forget it? Maybe not 100%, but you're not having nightmares about it anymore.
I think we're going to wrap that up at this point in time. So we have some networking and things to do, but we want to thank you very, very much. It was an incredible presentation and great question and answer. So thank you all very, very, very much. Thanks, everybody.